And now to alarming new information about former President Trump's alleged efforts to stay in power after losing the 2020 election. Multiple officials, including the former acting attorney general, told the January 6th committee that Trump tried to get Justice Department leaders to lie to the country about the results. When they wouldn't do that, they say that he tried to replace them. So CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa has the details.
These were high-stakes hearings. Former top Justice Department officials from the final days of the Trump administration testified that ultimately even President Trump's own lawyers challenged his plan to install an acting attorney general who was spreading widespread claims of voter fraud, claims that were false and that the president had been told were false.
He was willing to sacrifice our republic to prolong his presidency.
The January 6th committee on Thursday turned to top leaders of President Trump's own Justice Department to build the case against him.
And then I said, well, Mr. President, you're right that I'm not going to allow the Justice Department to do anything to try to overturn the election.
Jeffrey Rosen became the country's top law enforcement official on Christmas Eve 2020 after Attorney General William Barr resigned, and Rosen quickly got a call from the president.
He thought the election had been stolen or was corrupt and that there was widespread fraud, and I had told him that our reviews had not shown that to be the case.
Rosen's deputy, Richard Donahue, remembered the president saying,
"What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman."
Rosen refused, and within days, Trump pushed to replace him with Jeffrey Clark, a Trump loyalist and an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department. According to testimony, Clark planned to send certain states a controversial letter, falsely alleging that evidence of widespread election fraud existed. In a tense Oval Office meeting, Donahue warned Trump,
"You could have hundreds and hundreds of resignations of the leadership of your entire Justice Department because of your actions. What's that going to say about you?"
Ultimately, Trump didn't elevate Clark, who pleaded the Fifth over 125 times in a committee deposition. Early Wednesday morning, federal agents searched Clark's home, seizing electronic devices.
By my count, at one point, 12 agents and 2 Fairfax County police officers went into my house, searched it for 3.5 hours. They took all of the electronics from my house. Yeah, I think this is highly politicized.
As Rosen insisted on the independence of the Justice Department.
The Justice Department gets out of the role that it's supposed to play. That's really bad for our country.
The committee also made a significant revelation. 5 House Republicans sought out pardons. Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, Congressman Mo Brooks of Alabama, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona, Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas, and Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. The committee believes this really matters because they believe it suggests these lawmakers could have felt they were in legal jeopardy for their role with Trump in the final days, trying to help him stay in office and block the certification of Joe Biden's election. Anne-Marie, Errol.
Bob, thank you very much. So CBS News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent Jeff Pegues is joining us now to talk a little bit more about this. Yeah, it was a real doozy yesterday. I feel like I say that each time we listen to another one of these public hearings. So, Jeff, we just heard the former acting attorney general say that it's, quote, bad for our country if the Justice Department gets out of the role that it's supposed to play. So can you explain to viewers just what that role is versus what the president wanted the Justice Department to do?
It is so important for the legal system in this country that the Justice Department stay in its lane. And while there is politics involved in terms of picking the Attorney General who leads the Department of Justice, the role of the Department of Justice is to represent the people of the United States, not a particular administration. And what you heard over and over again yesterday is how the leadership installed at that time was trying to keep the Department of Justice out of meddling in state elections by alleging that there was some sort of irregularity, which there wasn't. So essentially lying to these states to look at the election in these states, to look at supposed irregularities, I should say, that weren't there. And so the goal of the leadership at that time, and you heard it over and over again, was to make sure that it did not cross that line. The Department of Justice did not cross the line into politics, which would create so many other issues. And that's why you heard them talk about the possibility of mass resignations, which would have been something that we have not seen in this country. We didn't see it during Watergate. It would be unprecedented for something like that to happen. And that's what they were outlining in that testimony.
And what's stunning is that would have followed the narrative that led to all of this conflict. President Trump had dismissed Attorney General Bill Barr, and that's why you had Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen. He looked into these allegations, couldn't find proof. The acting deputy, Richard Donahue, said as much. Jeff, why then was Jeffrey Clark so key in this purported scheme of President Trump, and how did he differ from everyone that had come before him?
Well, what we heard outlined yesterday is how Jeffrey Clark was willing to do what the president wanted the Department of Justice to do, which was send this memo that Clark had written. And Clark, by the way, was a relatively unknown prosecutor in the Department of Justice, but he stepped forward and essentially said, hey, Mr. President, I'll do whatever you want me to do. You want me to send this letter to these states outlining irregularities? Well, I'll do that, even though the leadership of the Department of Justice at that time was saying, we are not seeing any evidence of irregularities in these elections. What are you talking about? So Jeffrey Clark was willing to go that step further to essentially do the president's bidding at that time. And that's why so many people within the Department of Justice, they were alarmed by what he was doing. The fact that he was even having conversations with the president or people in the White House was unusual. And that's why he raised a lot of alarms. And he became a key figure in this showdown in the Oval Office, because you had Jeffrey Clark in this confrontation with department leadership at that time. And they were essentially saying, Mr. President, you cannot do this. You cannot put this guy in control of the Department of Justice. He doesn't have the credibility. He doesn't have the experience. This is someone who was an environmental attorney. He didn't have courtroom experience. He didn't have the leadership experience to lead the Department of Justice at that time. However, according to the testimony, he was willing, Jeffrey Clark was willing to step forward and do whatever the president told him to do.
And of course, evidence should lead you to an outcome. It appears what they're describing is President Trump had the outcome he wanted, and he was seeking the evidence and the people to justify it. We're going to talk more about all of this this hour. Jeff, thank you very much. Also this morning, we hear from the filmmaker behind a docuseries that's just become a major part of the Select Committee's work. Stick around for more on that. You see the info on your screen.